So this is everything that I watched in January. Started off the year with His Girl Friday. This one was a rewatch, and I think it has cemented itself as maybe one of my favorite films ever. It's about this fairly dodgy but very charming newspaper publisher, and his ex-wife is about to get engaged to this new guy. He decides that he can't have that, so he spends the entire movie trying to scheme to get her back. It's black and white. It came out in 1940, and people have that expectation that older films like this are going to be very dry and stuffy and proper, but His Girl Friday is nothing like that. Every scene is basically this back and forth with machine gun fire like dialogue as this guy tries to desperately come up with some way to keep his wife from getting onto the train. And so we have the joy of that dialogue and just how funny it is, but then just the entire scenario of him having one lie build upon another lie, and you're almost waiting for the whole house of cards to fall down. He's not a good guy, he's not doing a nice thing, but it's just really funny to see how far he can get away with it. And then also the fact that his ex-wife knows exactly what he's like and exactly what he's trying to do. It's just really fun and it's really funny, and it's just one of those ones that holds up so well. Next up was Nosferatu, the original 1922 silent version. Obviously Robert Eggers' Nosferatu is coming out, so I wanted to see the original first, and I'm really glad that I did, because I've never really watched that much silent cinema before, and watching this made me think I really should, because it's still good, it holds up. The movie 100 years later is still creepy as hell, and it's one of those things where even though we have modern technology and we can put anything on film nowadays, you can't replicate what this is doing. There's just something about the limitations of what they had at the time that is just really eerie. What really caught me off guard was the intertitles. Obviously this is a silent movie, so they have to put text physically up on screen to show what characters are saying. And obviously now with sound you don't need intertitles in films anymore, so you don't see them, but I actually really liked it in this film. It gave the whole thing a much more storybook feeling. It made it all feel like this really creepy ancient fairy tale. And obviously it's one of those things where they're just a product of the time. They were doing that because they couldn't record sound, so that was the only way to communicate dialogue. But it does feel like we lost something in never using them anymore. And it's just one of those reminders that every time there is a technological leap forward, there is something left behind. Now, it was really interesting watching this right before watching the new Nosferatu, which I'll not talk too much about because you can watch it here, but it was cool seeing the things that Robert Eggers decided to keep the same and the certain things he decided to change from the original. So if you've had any interest in the Nosferatu remake recently, I think it's worth going back and watching the original, because I certainly got a lot out of it. The next thing I saw was We Live in Time, which was the really sad Florence Pugh cancer movie, and I was really quite impressed by this. We've seen a million times where a couple meet for the first time. We've seen a million couples' first arguments, but every scene in this, they had a slightly different way into it. They give everything a slightly fresh angle. And then there's the fact that this movie happens completely out of order. It's a totally non-linear narrative. And so when you combine those two things, you get this movie that even though you kind of know how it's going to play out and how these things go, you never actually know what's going to happen next, because it could happen literally anywhere or anytime. And it was just really lovely. I'd recommend this one. Nickel Boys is a film that I've never seen anything like before. It's told entirely in the first person. It's about these two teenagers who meet at this school, which is supposed to be for troubled youth, but the school has no aims to actually help people at all. It's run by racists who basically just abuse the boys there. And this is one of those movies where I really appreciated it more than I liked it. I was very impressed with how it was made. I didn't think that a first person movie like this would ever work at all, but it's really effective. I heard someone describe it as the first person isn't good for showing something literally, but it feels like how a memory feels, and I thought that was a perfect way of describing it. And because so much of the movie is about looking back and about memory, it feels perfect for the story that it's telling. And so it never feels like a gimmick. In fact, I came away from it going, I would actually like to see more films shot this way. I could see other first-person films working. And it's a really powerful and interesting story too, but it was honestly just the runtime that really hampered it for me. I think if this was a 90-minute film, I would have absolutely loved it, but at 2 hours 20, I just struggled with the runtime a bit. But again, I know I am the odd one out on this, and it is one that is still really worth seeing. Next, I got to see Seven. They were showing it in the cinemas again for its 30th anniversary re-release, and it was great just to see it on the big screen. And it's one of those ones I'm really glad I got to see with an audience, because if you know the film, it's a mystery, and the ending of it and the reveal of it is pretty shocking. So to hear people physically react to that scene was pretty fantastic. If you haven't watched Seven, you need to watch Seven, because yeah, the ending is something else. So I rewatched Birdman, and I really wasn't sure if I was going to like this one on rewatch. It's one of those things where obviously it won Best Picture back in 2015, but I was scared that the whole being shot in one take, or made to look like it was shot in one take, would feel really gimmicky, and that the whole thing would feel like it was trying to be really worthy for the Oscars. But I actually really liked it, and the whole thing is set in one location because the main character is doing a play, and obviously all plays are done, you know, in one continuous take essentially. So that whole setting tying in with how the camera was used, I thought was really effective. The script for it is really good, and it's one of those things where, you know, you're always aware of the camera, but it just is using it to tell a good and interesting story, and it's got great performances. And I think this one holds up. It's good. Suzume is a movie that I've been meaning to watch for ages and finally got around to. I don't know why it took me so long to get to this one, because I really liked the director's previous film, Weathering with You, and I also really love Your Name. It's about this girl that opens this mysterious door, and then in doing that, it accidentally unleashes this weird demon thing in all various places around Japan, so she has to try and go around and stop it. And it is a really fun, heartwarming adventure. It does have quite a sad story at its core, but in the end, it is really life-affirming. The next film I saw was The Magnificent Ambersons, which was Orson Welles' follow-up to Citizen Kane. Now, famously, he did not get final cut on this film, and he had something like 40 minutes of his version of it cut out, and the ending changed. So the actual film we have is kind of a bastardized version of what he wanted, but even with that, it's still really good. It's about the heir to this rich family, the Ambersons, and the relationship between his mum and then this other man that she'd always loved. And again, that sounds really old and stuffy, and maybe it is a little bit, but it's one of those things where the characters in it are just so strong, and it's got just that timeless feel to it that it still holds up really well. It is sad watching it, wondering what could have been, because it is so heavily cut down and it does suffer from that. It does move a little bit fast, especially in the second half of the film, but it is still one that's really worth watching. I watched the new Bob Zemeckis film Here, and I'll not talk too much about it because I already made a video here, which you can watch, but it's essentially all told in this one fixed perspective. It's a film where the camera never moves, and it shows this one living room over the course of thousands of years, but mainly over the period of 100 years. And it's not a masterpiece, it's not a knockout, but I enjoyed it more than a lot of the critics did. So yeah, if you want to see my full thoughts, watch the video on that there. Chicago is a movie that I went in knowing nothing about, and I think that is the best way to experience it, because, you know, whenever that inciting incident happens, it was genuinely shocking to me. Again, I had the joy of seeing this as a re-release in the cinema, and again, when a movie has, you know, this many great musical sequences, getting to see it on as big a screen as possible is ideal. The movie's just really funny, it's witty, and I just love the way it looks. They just don't make films that look like this anymore. The cast is obviously fantastic. Renee Zellweger is amazing, but John C. Reilly in this movie, he has a fairly small part, but he just steals every scene he's in my opinion. You just feel so bad for him. It was a movie where the ending to me felt really abrupt. I thought it was going to go on for another 20 minutes, but it just stopped. After Chicago, I saw Emilia Perez, and yeah, but honestly, the less said, the better. I think because was so late getting to this, and I'd heard so much negative press around this movie, that I went into it with my expectations on the floor. And so with that, I probably didn't think it was as bad as I would have if I'd gone in completely blind. It's a musical about the leader of a Mexican drug cartel who is trans and wants to transition. This movie's got a lot of criticism for how it's represented different cultures and different identities, and there's a lot of people out there who can talk with more knowledge and confidence about that than I can. But even without that, it's a musical that has no good songs. I'm stunned at how well this is done at the Oscars. It's trying to tell this like really worthy feeling story, but all of it just feels really disingenuous. So when they, you know, cut to these musical sequences which are supposed to, you know, inform you about the character and tell you about how they're thinking and feeling internally, and the music is all terrible, it's just a really frustrating experience. And I don't seem to understand why everyone disliked this movie except for Academy voters. There's been a lot of clips from the movie going around on the internet, and usually that can feel a little unfair because, you know, you're taking just like the worst moments out of context. But like the worst moments in it are really bad. But like that song that's been going viral, when you actually watch like the full thing in context, it's even weirder because it's like, how did they write this and get people to learn it and choreograph it and film it, edit it and release it? And nobody stopped to go, this was a bad idea. But yeah, I really did not like Emilia Perez, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it actually does end up performing on Oscars night, especially because the lead actress has gotten in a lot of controversy for her past tweets. And the final movie I saw in January was Presents, but I already made a full video talking about that, so if you want to see that, you can watch it there. And that's everything I watched this month in January. And so that's it for this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to make sure that you don't miss anything else coming up on the channel, make sure to subscribe.